I think we are live. I'm just going to go ahead and check with everyone to make sure that we are live on all the right platforms. Okay, so while we check that, it's also a good opportunity for anyone to join in. They're just joining in a little bit later. So while we wait, if anyone is here, please comment wherever you're watching, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, or if you're watching on our website, you can go ahead and just submit a Google form that's embedded there. I believe it's entitled Live Kickoff and Q&A Questions. Tell us where you're listening in from, any questions that you have, and what you're most excited about for this live Q&A. Ideally, your number one question or struggle when it comes to coping with ADHD during the middle school years. And if you could have access to whatever you wanted, how would you best help yourself and your family through the middle school years? The more specific you can be, the better. So please, if you do answer, don't be afraid to go into detail and share any other questions that you might have for us during this live Q&A. All right. So Richard Mulch is tuning in from Seattle. Hello, Richard, and welcome. And I've got confirmation that we are live, I believe, everywhere. So that is great. And we'll just give it another 5 minutes for anyone to log on. All right. So it seems we've got some listeners on YouTube, on Facebook, through multiple different groups, and also on our website. So if any of you are tuning in and you have just watched the ADHD in, you have purchased the All Access Pass, let us know in the chat as well as what you thought. I always love to hear feedback so that we can keep improving as we move forward. We have got some really special things in store for you today, so I'm very excited about that. And as we let another 2 minutes go by before we dive in. All right, just one more minute, and then we'll be on. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you can all see my screen. Oh, actually, one quick second. Okay, so here we go. All right, can everyone see the screen that I am sharing? If you can, please let me know in the chat. I know my team is also listening in here, so if you can see it, team, please let me know in our chat. Okay, cool. All right, I think we're good to go then. Looks like the window is still visible, even though I've made it small. Everyone can read the writing. All right, well, first of all, I want to just welcome everybody to the ADHD in Middle School Summit Live Q&A. So today we have a lot of very interesting topics to cover. And if you're joining us having just watched the ADHD in Middle School Summit, or you're part of the All Access Pass, or you're part of the online course, or you're part of ADHD membership, or you're just a complete stranger and seeing this for the first time, welcome. I wanted to first let everyone know that this is the time to now close all distractions. So if you are multitasking, put your phone away. and get ready for all the goodness that is coming to you. You're probably going to want to get a pen and paper as well, so that we can make sure you get notes from this session. I would also like for everyone to take the time, if you can, just take a quick 2 minutes to share this page or this event on social media, because everyone who does will be getting a free gift by attending. We might have a special surprise or a couple special surprises for you later on. So now is the time to share. Please do so over the next minute or so. And then I want to go over what we're going to be learning today. So for those of you who are familiar with Smart Course, we basically are going over how to help your child with ADHD thrive through the middle school years. And this Q&A will be covering topics relevant to that as well as some of the biggest takeaways from our ADHD in Middle School Summit. So here are the bullet points of what we're going to be covering. Some problems that you might be facing during this time are distance learning. That's thanks to the pandemic. Executive function skills, organization and time management, your child's motivation, if your child should be on medication or not, and the communication issues that may arise with your family. And then we're going to be going over the biggest takeaways from the AIM Summit. Then we're going to have the live Q&A portion of this webinar. And then we're going to go over some surprise bonuses. So who am I? What is Smart Course? What are you doing here? And why are you listening? So my name is Adrian Harrison. I am the founder and CEO of smartcourse.io, which is an education technology and digital healthcare startup focused on solving all of the problems of kids with special needs. So primarily, as an entrepreneur, I'm focused on education technology and digital healthcare. I was featured in Forbes, at Health Venture, and in StartEd's EdTech Accelerator, which is the largest global accelerator on education technology. I've been a speaker at WeWork, Startup Boost, Freelancers Union, and many more. Growing up, I was a marginalized student, and I'll get into that very shortly. But basically, I'm really passionate about solving these problems because I was experiencing them myself as a kid. And I just don't think that they're necessary. So I built Smart Course so that no other kids would have to go through that and would get access to equal opportunity, a solid education, and a chance to thrive. So my mission is to empower parents, educators, medical professionals, and other caregivers of kids with ADHD, as well as other special needs. But for this webinar, we're going to be focusing on ADHD, particularly during the middle school years, to help students with ADHD thrive through the middle school years, both at school and at home. All right. So a little bit, going a little too ahead of myself there. So a little bit about me is that growing up, I went to a French school in New York City, and the French education system is very strict compared to the American education system. And as a very curious kid, I would get into a lot of trouble because I would ask a lot of questions, and my teachers didn't like that very much. So one day, I was in a middle school history and geography class with a teacher who just really didn't like me. And so the first time that I asked a question challenging her on, I don't even remember what it was. Maybe it was like why we had to sit in a certain order or something like that. She sent me out of the classroom to go to the dean's office. And I was expecting that the dean would reprimand me for that behavior, but instead he actually ended up being this really cool, chill, understanding guy who actually was really curious about what I thought about the education system and why I thought I could improve it or saw different ways of improving it. And we actually agreed on so many of these different things. And so I got really passionate about talking to him about revolutionizing or changing the education system. And, we would talk about what should the future of education look like and what is the best education system and why. And turns out that this middle school dean of mine has ADHD, that he's always had ADHD. He has 2 twin daughters, one with ADHD and one without. And growing up as a kid, he would always get into trouble, but no one thought ADHD was real at the time. And still to this day, a lot of people don't think that ADHD is real. So instead of people being understanding of it, they would just reprimand him and punish him and just label him as being a bad kid instead of a kid who was deserving of empathy for being different. And so over time, I switched schools. I went to an American boarding school and I got to see what that education system was like. And then eventually, fast forward a couple more years, I went to university in the UK, to the University of St. Andrews. And so I got to see what the UK's education system was like. And still going through all these systems, I was seeing all of the pros and cons of what it was like. And yet I still felt like there was so much to be done. And I felt like definitely the American system was a better fit for me. And so I kind of summarize it as the French school system will put you down so that you want to prove them wrong. The American system will pull you up even if you don't care. And the UK system doesn't really care what you do, but if you do good, then good on you, right? And so over time, I kept thinking about, okay, I want to do something about this education system, but I'm just a college kid. I have no idea what to do. And I had taken this module in the second semester of my second year called Enterprise and Creativity, which basically had us build a startup over the course of a semester. And I loved that process. I fell in love with that process, and it was really, really exciting for me to dive deep into what startups are, how do they work, what they can do. And then I made the connection that if I become a great entrepreneur, then I will be able to do something about the education system. And so that's what I did. I just taught myself a ton about how to start a startup. And over the course of a couple of years, I built several different businesses. I was learning about business development and web design and digital marketing and sales optimization and all these things for the purpose of finally getting really good at what eventually really interested me, online courses. And the reason that online courses really interested me was, it's kind of a weird story, but I had been listening to this podcast called The Tim Ferriss Show, which basically prides itself on bringing on the world-leading experts in different fields and then dissecting how these experts got to where they are. And so one of these episodes had this guy named Ramit Sethi come on, and he had a business that sounded incredibly scammy. It was called IWillTeachYouToBeRich.com. And I thought that was really funny, but also very strange, because when I was listening to his interview, I thought, this guy clearly knows what he's talking about. I mean, he's a smart guy. The advice that he's giving here for free on this podcast is very valuable. Why would he choose a name like that? And I just didn't understand. So I followed up with him. I checked out his website. I signed up for his newsletter. And over a couple of months, just like getting to see his content, I started to understand, okay, this free content is amazing. I can't imagine what his paid content must be like. And he had this course called Zero to Launch, which basically said, we will teach you how to build and launch your own online business. And if you don't achieve your goal, or if you take this course and you're not satisfied, you will get your money back. And that's when it hit me, because that was such an important moment where I realized that is what education should look like. It should be something that's guaranteed. While instead what's happening today is you've got kids who are 18 years old or younger making insanely complicated financial decisions, getting themselves into sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, unable to ever get out of that debt sometimes, and for the purpose of going to a university to get a piece of paper that may or may not get them a job, that may or may not provide them with the life that they want to live. And yet that is what college is promising them, whether that's indirectly through society's expectations or through their parents or through sometimes blatantly the college themselves. And so that really pissed me off. That rubbed me the wrong way, because I thought it's so unfair for kids who don't fit into this system to put themselves through so much debt and stress and strain to maybe not even be able to get out of it ever. And so I thought, okay, these online courses are really special, because what Ramit Sethi was telling me was through this online course was, I understand who you are, where you're at, and I understand who you want to be and where you want to be, right? My point A and my point B. And he was saying this online course will get you from your point A to your point B, and I stand behind my content, so I'm going to guarantee that you like that, or that it's a good fit for you. And if it's not, you get your money back. So that really inspired me. And after digging into many different online courses, because at the time, people thought online courses were crazy. They thought, you're going to be spending how much money paying this random stranger online? You're insane. That person is going to run away with your money and you're going to lose it all. But I thought, hey, look, there's this guarantee. What do I have to lose? So I invested over $2,400 in this course, and it definitely, well, first of all, it was revolutionary for me as an entrepreneur. That's point one. It was almost as comprehensive as I thought it would be, and it definitely gave me the foundation needed to build my own online business. And here we are, several startups later. But what was so fascinating was this concept of being able to guarantee a result through education. And so I had reached back out to my middle school dean that I hadn't spoken to in so many years, and I said, hey, I've got this idea. I've been thinking about the education system ever since we've talked about it. And, I've been thinking about who are the people who are the most disadvantaged in the education system today. It's kids with special needs. And that is for a variety of different reasons. In large part, it's because they're underserved, underrepresented, and there's a massive lack of education for all of the caregivers of these kids. Forget about to the kids themselves. So parents, educators, medical professionals, other caregivers like test prep agencies, tutors, etc., just aren't trained on how to help kids with different needs. So after doing a ton of research, we understood that kids with ADHD tend to suffer the most during the middle school years. And so I was telling my middle school dean about this, and that's when he told me that he has ADHD and that he has two daughters with ADHD, twins, one with and one without. And so he got to see, also that he was vastly overqualified for being my middle school dean, because he'd also taught at Teachers College, Columbia University. He's got all these formal accolades for being a professor and on the philosophy of education. And so he got to see it from every angle. He got to see it from the parenting angle, he got to see it from the educator's angle, and he got to see it from the medical professional angle, because he had to deal with medical professionals for all of his kids. So he knows what the interactions with a psychiatrist or clinical psychologist or clinical neuropsychologist or the ADHD coach or behavioral therapist or licensed marriage family therapist were like. And these are all the different caregivers that caregivers of kids with ADHD are going to have to interact with at some point or another in order to ensure that their kids are being helped. So all of that to say that I spent a lot of time thinking about this problem and speaking to parents, educators, and medical professionals about the different problems that they were experiencing with their kids with ADHD. So, first I was doing what everyone else was doing. I joined a ton of overcrowded Facebook groups with parents that spent all their time complaining or venting inside of these groups instead of sharing actionable solutions. And obviously this wasn't helping at all, but you can't blame them because having kids with ADHD is very difficult. And so having a place to vent is also very understandable. But having groups that are just full of people venting don't really help. So let me give you an example of what that looked like. So here's a screenshot of a couple of different posts that I saw through these Facebook groups when I was exploring them. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, this is the Facebook group nightmare, because what you're being promised when you're joining these groups is support and, you're going to be helped and, peer support and all of that, except the peers aren't qualified to help you. And so what ends up happening is just this, a lot of venting, a lot of complaining, but no value. And so that doesn't actually solve your problem. And I really wanted to do something about that. So, reading blog posts on ADHD, watching videos on ADHD, all of that, it kind of helped, but barely. And it wasn't until I finally found out about ADHD experts who were sharing expert vetted resources that were actually effective that I actually started to learn. So here are some of the legitimate ADHD experts that were sharing actionable value that actually got results. So I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, probably not. But starting from the left at the top, that is Melissa Orlov. She is the leader on how ADHD impacts relationships in the world. To the right of that is Dr. Conchetta DeCaria, who is a legendary diagnostician for special needs, especially things like ADHD. And to the right of that is Mr. Daniel Kramarski, who is my middle school dean. And someone vastly overqualified for that role. To the right of that is Dr. Sarah Wheeler, who is both a school psychologist and ADHD coach. So she was incredibly helpful to get an understanding of the role a school psychologist should actually play in your child's lives. To the right of that is Dr. Sarah Allen, who is both a certified brain injury specialist and an ADHD accommodations consultant. So she was incredibly helpful for me to understand what needs to get done on the school side of things, getting an IEP in place or a 504 plan, as well as why it's really important to get a good understanding of your child's unique ADHD brain profile, because that unique profile should inform what accommodations you get in place. There are plenty of accommodations out there, but if they're not meant for your kid, they're not going to help you. And then to the right of that is Dr. Sharon Saline, also a legendary clinical psychologist who wrote some really amazing books and has done some great research on how it feels like to be a kid with ADHD and what's going on in their mind and the different kinds of thoughts that they have as a result of that, how they're being judged on a constant basis, how some of their friends might be treating them differently, how their parents constantly label them and treat them differently. These are really painful experiences to have. So speaking with her was really, really helpful for me to understand and empathize better with the ways that caregivers don't understand the impact that they have on their kids. And then there's tons of other, huge names. So like Dr. William Dodson, Dr. Peg Dawson, Dr. Ned Hollowell, Dr. Ross Green, Dr. Jerome Schultz, Dr. Russell Ramsey, Dr. George McCloskey, Dr. Roberto Olivardia, Dr. Manju Banerjee, Elaine Taylor-Klaus, Diane Dempster, Cindy Goldrich. All of these experts have been invaluable for me. And I basically got a masterclass on what it takes to tackle all of the problems of ADHD during the middle school years from every perspective, right? And we can really divide those up into 5 different perspectives. But all of this is to say that after meeting all of these experts and learning everything that I could about ADHD, especially during the middle school years, I learned much more than I ever could have through years of research alone, right? So for all of you, if you're listening to this and you have been on this journey, just going to blog posts or watching YouTube videos or reading newsletters or joining Facebook groups, this is for you. That will only get you so far. And every day you waste not getting the actual best results for your kid, that kid is suffering. So I understand, if you want good content, you have to invest in good content, but that's just how it is, right? So all I want to say about that is it's so worth it, not just so that you can solve these problems faster, but also so that your kid doesn't have to suffer while you're doing all this research alone with these not necessarily expert vetted resources. So how did we do that? Well, we put together a giant summit. It was called the ADHD in Middle School Summit. We had over 40 plus world-leading experts on ADHD, and we brought them all together to target 5 major things over the course of 5 days. So day 1 targeted all things parenting and executive functions. Day 2 targeted all things to do with school, right? So homework, accommodations, dealing with your school psychologist, IEPs, 504s, all of that. Day 3 dealt with all things family relationships. And that's not just, in general, it's like specifically marriage relationships, because the rate of divorce for parents of kids with ADHD is twice as high as it is for neurotypical kids. And so dealing with just that marriage relationship is really, really important, not just so that you and your spouse could live happily, but also so that your kid isn't suffering while you guys are fighting, right? At the same time, we dealt with parent-child relationships, which tend to be incredibly strained as well. And then also child-sibling relationships, which tend to be very difficult when some of the family members have ADHD and some do not. Day 4, we talked about the tougher side of ADHD. So comorbidities, that can include SPD, ODD, depression, anxiety. We had a great talk about suicide, which doesn't get talked about enough, but it is very real for kids with ADHD. They're much more at risk, and therefore talking about it, bringing out in the open, and educating yourself about that so that you can help a child with ADHD who may be suicidal before they kill themselves is something that I know is uncomfortable, but really important to talk about. And then day 5, we talked about medications and the ADHD brain. So, what should you be talking to your psychiatrist about? What are the different medications out there? How do I decide which one is best for me? How do I test it? What is the ADHD brain? Why is it different? How do the neurochemicals work? How can I understand why my child is having a meltdown right now? All of those kinds of things. So it was really, really, really packed with content, super valuable from all sides. And we did it completely free. So it ran from August 24th till August 28th. And if you were a part of it, then you could watch all of the sessions for free. So here's some things that some of our speakers and some of the world-leading experts on ADHD had to say about the summit. So this is Elaine Taylor-Klaus. She's the founder of ImpactADHD.com, which is the most popular blog on ADHD in the world. And she says, when you get the world's leading thought leaders on kids, school, and ADHD in one place, the results are magnifying. When you target the conversation on middle schoolers, the conversations are both practical and socially and emotionally impactful. And when you add an excellent interviewer like Adrian Harrison, you have a recipe for a particularly excellent online summit. This one's worth catching for sure. Really appreciated that from Elaine. That was a really awesome that she endorsed us like that. Next was Leslie Josell, who says, as an ADHD coach for students who also provides coaching for parents, I hear all day long how frustrated and confused parents are when it comes to navigating the middle school years with children with ADHD. They are looking for real guidance, real strategies, and real answers. This summit provides that and more. With its top-notch speakers, attendees are going to get all the guidance and support they need. I'm thrilled to be a small part of it. She's the principal of Order Out of Chaos, a speaker, a coach, and the creator of the award-winning Academic Planner, a tool for time management, which I'm sure many of you caregivers are familiar with because of how much time management is difficult to do when you have a child with ADHD. So then we had what was called the All Access Pass. So if you wanted to get lifetime access to these sessions, which I highly recommend, you could get the All Access Pass, and that would basically allow you to get lifetime access to 40 plus ADHD expert masterclass videos, right? 50 plus hours of masterclasses in audio MP3 format, 40 plus session notes, handouts, and action guides, access to Smart Courses ADHD expert community, additional exclusive bonus resources like discounted premium courses, training, VIP Q&A, and much, much more, plus special deals and discounts from our partners and more, which we've put as a perks and deals section available in our membership, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. So after that, I want to tell everyone about Smart Course ADHD membership. This is more new. It's our newest offering, and it's really, really cool. So I'm going to dive in with what we have done with ADHD membership. So for a lot of you, the jump from free content to buying the All Access Pass is too great, and that's okay. We want this stuff to be as accessible as possible, which is why we make it available for free. So we created Smart Course ADHD membership. So ADHD membership basically gets you access to our expert moderated ADHD support group on a monthly membership, and all of the exclusive perks and deals that we set up with sponsors, partners, speakers, affiliates, etc. And all of their content is obviously very, very relevant to you as well, right? So why not get it at a hugely discounted price as part of our ADHD membership? Plus, so many of the issues that you have are specific to you, and unless you're able to ask them in a community that's actually moderated by experts, it's going to be very difficult for you to get that answered unless you're willing to spend hundreds of dollars per hour to see an expert in the real world. However, for most of you, that isn't a possibility. And even if it is, you do want to speak to these experts and hear what they have to say before you go out into the real world and pay for some random expert that you found on your own, because you're not going to know what questions you should be asking that expert and how to determine whether or not that expert actually knows what they're talking about and whether or not they're a good fit for you and your child. So that's a great opportunity for everybody to be able to do that at a very, very, very low cost. Next is the ADHD in Middle School online course. So just like the ADHD in Middle School All Access Pass, the online course is very in-depth, right? So here's everything that you get in the online course, right? First of all, you get lifetime access to everything in the All Access Pass, right? So that's the 40 plus ADHD expert masterclass videos, but plus you get 6 in-depth walkthrough lessons, which were really, really important. Those are taught by those experts that I was talking about earlier, Melissa Orlov, Dr. Conchetta Dakaria, Mr. Daniel Komarski, Dr. Sarah Wheeler, Dr. Sarah Allen, and Dr. Sharon Salim. And each of them I selected very specifically to cover very specific, what we call burning pains that the market experiences, right? These are the inevitable pitfalls that every single parent of a child with ADHD will go through, no matter what. And the reason we did it that way is because we want to tackle the problems that we know every single person is going to go through. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking to yourselves, if you're new to ADHD or taking care of this stuff in the middle school years, oh, well, I'll probably figure it out. It's fine. Like, let's see how the first year goes. Good luck. The amount of parents that we've had reaching out to us telling us like, this is so needed because the middle school years are particularly terrible is because, I'll just dive into some of the reasons. With executive function deficits, the more strain that you're asking of this child to organize with now many different teachers instead of one that they had to deal with in elementary school, with now many different friends, which they probably had less of in elementary school, with now puberty in the mix, with excellence as the new standard, with more serious tests, exams, all of these pressures, it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with for kids with ADHD. And so shit happens, right? The family relationships start to get strained. You start to think, damn, I might have to get some medication for this child because if I don't know what to do, right? I'm going to start to need to speak to an ADHD coach or have a behavioral therapist look into this because there's probably some other comorbidities that I don't know about. I'm going to have to see a professional diagnostician to see, okay, what are the comorbidities? Is it just ADHD? Is it ADHD and SPD? Is it ADHD and ODD? Is it ADHD and anxiety, ADHD and depression? These are all things that I should really know about because the last thing you want is your kid to be depressed or anxious or whatever and just not telling you about it. And so we targeted all of these things, right? We have experts that are tackling each and every single one of these biggest problems. So anyway, you get everything in the All Access Pass, everything in these in-depth walkthrough lessons. It's over 70 plus hours of master classes and walkthroughs in a downloadable MP3 format for you as well, if you prefer to listen. You get all those session handouts and action guides. You get access to different communities. One, you Smart Courses ADHD Expert Community for a month, right? And then you also get lifetime access to the AIMS online course community with all of your peers and instructors, which is super helpful. Plus, you get all the perks and deals and discounted premium courses, etc., that we talked about earlier. So, why are digital resources becoming so important for ADHD, right? Great question. Well, here is a graph showing you the trend of search results for ADHD over time. So as you can see, it's been spiking pretty consistently over the past 5 years, right? So what that tells us is people have issues with ADHD and they want to go to Google to find solutions to their issues, right? And pairing that quantitative data with the qualitative data that we've collected, having interviewed, I mean, here it says hundreds of parents, teachers, and other caregivers, but it's been a lot more than that. Saying things like, I struggle with him not listening to me. He denies that he has a problem. How common is that one, right? I want to know how to get her tested. I want someone to give me recommendations, go to the doctor, get the paperwork, put a 504 or IEP in place, and have the school psychologist actually help. Organization is a nightmare. I have heard this so many times. I want to know how his brain works so when he is having a meltdown, I can understand and help him. Things aren't great at home. I'd want access to a therapist or someone who can help with the family. Now, this is a huge euphemism, and I mainly put that there because I think it's going to make some people uncomfortable to hear what actually goes on behind closed doors for some of these families. But I'm going to bring it up because I think it's really important, obviously not bringing up any names. But in a lot of cases, especially when there's an ADHD parent to an ADHD child and a non-ADHD parent and an ADHD child, there are cases of domestic abuse. There's cases of physical punishment. And that is very, very linked to the ADHD because of the impulsiveness that comes with it in certain cases. So I just want to bring that up. If you are experiencing that, to talk about it with a therapist or to find an expert who can help with that. Do not suffer silently. None of her teachers would listen. They just kept piling on the work, which is impossible, especially with distance learning. How common is this one now, right? With COVID, things are completely different. And these teachers who were already not trained, 99% of general education teachers are not trained on how to help kids with different needs. And now add on that those same teachers are doing it at a distance, which they're also not trained to do, is complete disaster because now the parents have to become the teacher and the parent and the medical professional for their kids, and the parents are not equipped to do that, right? So who ends up suffering? Everybody. Everybody ends up suffering, but especially the kid. So talking about distance learning was a huge piece of our summit. I definitely had major fears about Ryan succeeding in life. Ever have any friends, ever have a normal life. I'm afraid that I'm going to have to help him with his homework for the rest of my life, right? These are direct quotes from people that we have spoken to. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate because these problems are so common to families and caregivers of kids with ADHD, right? Social issues, super common. Homework issues, super common. And parents feeling like their kids are just never going to be independent. So, all of this is to say that, let's go to the next slide here. You are all pioneers at the forefront of equal access to resources on ADHD. Now, why do I say that? Today, and especially now, is a very, very rare time in human history. And it just so happens that really good online software, tech-savvy industry professionals and medical professionals and educators, and big data, or the ability to acquire large amounts of data on what statistically is working best, are converging, right? That's all happening now. And that's really, really special because once I started learning directly from these experts on ADHD, I didn't have to spend hours second-guessing my decision or sifting through misinformation or fearing that I'd regret my decisions. I would just implement the strategies and instantly get positive results that dramatically improved my life and the lives of the people that I cared most about, right? Doesn't everybody want this? I know that it's very difficult to express what the end goal is, but I feel like this is it, right? You just want to be able to know, hey, if I invest in this, my life is going to get better, right? And I totally get that, which is why every single one of our products is guaranteed, because we don't spend, tons of time, money, blood, sweat, and tears building this stuff for you guys not to enjoy it. That would just waste our time, right? And at the same time, I don't want to build anything and sell it to someone who is not going to get any value out of it, right? I don't deserve your money at that point. All right. So moving on, I want to go over some of the biggest takeaways that we've had during the ADHD in Middle School Summit. So, these are the biggest takeaways that we have found, and obviously we narrowed it down to just 5 because there's way too many, otherwise we'd be here all night, for all of you to hear. Okay, so on day 1, which was about parenting and executive functions, from Dr. Ross Green, who is a legendary clinical psychologist, probably one of the most famous ones in the entire world. His talk was entitled Collaborative and Proactive Solutions, Teaching the Skills on the Better Side of Human Nature. Here were the top 3 lessons that we want you to keep in mind. Kids do well if they can, not if they want, so something must be getting in their way. Now, I want to explain this and just give it a little bit of context so you guys understand, because it's very simple language, but it's actually very profound. A lot of you are probably thinking about, okay, my kid hasn't cleaned their room and I've told them 50 times to do it. They don't want to do it, right? They're just not doing it because they want to spite me, or they're not doing it because they don't care about it, right? Wrong. What this is saying is kids with ADHD who struggle to, for example, clean their room are not doing it because they want to spite you or whatever else. It's because they can't do it, right? They're afraid about knowing that they can't do it. And so instead of trying and failing and feeling embarrassed that they can't do that, they hold it in. And by holding it in, to the caregiver, it seems like, oh, they're being disrespectful. They're not listening to what I'm saying. Or they're not, paying attention when they commit to me and say, yes, I will clean my room, etc. It's not their fault. It's the way that their brains are structured, right? So even though they can commit to you and say, yes, like I totally understand, it's important to clean my room, unless the triggers in their brains are telling them and giving them the dopamine they need to get that energy to be able to do a task that is so draining to them, right? If they even are able to focus on that task and remember that they need to do that task, then they would do it. And so it's not that they don't want to, it's that they cannot do it. And so what Ross Greene is saying is kids will do well if they can, not if they want. So if you allow them to, by doing whatever you need to do, whether that's behavioral therapy or medications or whatever, then you will see much better results. It's not your job to know, it is your job to find out. Such a good point. On the flip side, right, there are many caregivers who are incredibly hard on themselves for just not knowing everything that they need to know in order to best help their kid. And they're seeing their kid suffer over and over again, and they're blaming themselves for it. And while on the one hand, it makes sense that they do that, they have to understand that, of course, you're not going to be able to do everything right yourself, right? Like, you're the parent. You're not the clinical psychologist. You're not the clinical neuropsychologist. You're not the psychiatrist. You're not the ADHD coach. You're not the diagnostician. You're not the clinical psychologist, the school psychologist. There are so many different specialized fields of expertise that come into play here. And so you can't blame yourself for just being a parent and wanting to help your kid. So forget about not knowing. Start focusing on finding out, on educating yourself, right? On who the best people are so that you can connect with them, or how to find the best people so that you connect with them to help your child, right? And obviously, the more you can educate yourself to help your child, the better, right? But don't blame yourself if you can't do everything. No one can do everything. It's too much. It's too much information. There's too many specialized fields that people spend their entire lives dedicated to get good at. Next is, it's not your job to be the one who comes up with the solution. It's your job to facilitate a process where you and the child come up with it together, right? And this is really important on two different points, because it's not about just coming up with solutions or not coming up with solutions. It's about getting buy-in from your child or the child that you care for, so that when you come up with a solution together, you actually are both committed to that solution. Whereas if it's just you coming up as the caregiver with a solution, then the child is going to feel like, oh, they're just imposing this and I don't want that, or I didn't like that, or whatever, and you're back at square one, right? So it's not really a solution. Coming up with it collaboratively, getting buy-in from the other person or stakeholder here, which is your child, is really, really important. So those were three top lessons that we would say keep in mind, really, really important ones. Okay, on day 2, we talked about ADHD in middle school, accommodations, and homework. And we are going to talk about one of the talks during that day from Dr. Manju Banerjee and Dr. Adam Laylor. Their talk was entitled Online Learning for Students Who Learn Differently. What do we currently know and how can we become better, right? So this was incredibly relevant due to the pandemic. So here are some key takeaways. Teachers must maintain empathy during online learning because of how this adjustment is particularly challenging for students with learning disabilities, right? And so going back to that statistic that I shared earlier, where 99% of gen ed teachers are not taught at all on how to help kids with different needs, it is now, the onus is now on parents to advocate for their kids with their teachers, right? Because, I mean, teachers must be having a really hard time right now, no doubt. I mean, just being thrown into distance learning without any training for that is probably very difficult. And then every child is probably having their own issues and bringing those up. So it's incredibly important, especially in these cases, for parents to be involved and to double down on advocating for their kid in ways that can help. Because another huge drawback of this distance learning is if your child relied on accommodations at school, they don't have those same accommodations at home with distance learning, right? So you're going to have to do more. You're going to either have to come up with other solutions, you're going to have to get more help, or you're going to have to advocate for your child with the teacher and come up with accommodations on the fly that would work better for you and your child, right? And that's just the reality. It's tough, but that's what it is, right? For parents, don't ask questions such as, have you done your homework yet? And why questions, because they may trigger defiance and anxiety in your child. Instead, you can ask, what happened that held you back from doing that, right? Because it works towards understanding your child and finding a solution. Going back to coming collaboratively to that solution, if you ask questions like, what happened that held you back, or what is it that went wrong here, and how can we better it, or how can we avoid it in the future, it's very different than, have you done your homework yet, right? Because that immediately implies that they haven't done their homework yet, or that you don't trust them enough to have done their homework yet, etc. And these things can be hurtful for kids with ADHD. So on day 3, we talked about family relationships and relationships with the school. And here we're going to highlight something from Dr. Anna Vagan, whose talk was entitled Play to Practice, Gaming for Social Learning. And she demonstrated how gaming can be an engaging way for children to build their social skills. I thought this talk was awesome because it took such a creative approach to teaching kids social skills that is actually fun, instead of just, potentially working with a social skills coach that the kid doesn't like, right? So if you're in that situation, think about ways you can use games to do that instead. Could be card games, tabletop games, competitive games, role-playing games, RPGs, learning games, dice games, etc., right? And the skills that you can learn playing these games with your kid is how to practice sustained engagement in an activity, right? Keeping that focus, something difficult for kids with ADHD. Understanding that mistakes are okay, right? They happen all the time in a game, and that's fine. Building that tolerance and that resilience is a good thing. Accepting rules, on the other hand, right, to meet a certain goal and working within certain constraints that exist in social life, in school, in a family, in a community. But through the microcosm of a game, it makes it a lot more fun and allows kids to basically do many different iterations of bumping up against the rules and coming up with a solution. Gaining a larger perspective, controlling impulsivity, right? Like if you are losing in the game and you get angry and you want to hit somebody, or you want to smack the game board or whatever, those are things that come up if you're incredibly impulsive. And so being able to play these games and seeing over time through learning different skills how to lower that impulsivity could be a great way for parents and caregivers to measure progress. Reading verbal and nonverbal cues, right? Really, really important for social skills and meeting new friends and making new friends. Demonstrating flexibility, right? Like, hey, say you're playing Monopoly. I will give you X in exchange, this boardwalk property if you give me Y, right? And being able to be flexible in that. And then, many other skills that will come up as you play these games. Day 4, we talked about the tougher side of ADHD, the different comorbidities and how to cope with them. And we're going to be highlighting Dr. Jerome J. Schultz, whose talk was entitled Middle School ADHD and Stress, What to Know and What to Do. He described what was called a DESTRESS model to help both the adult and child figure out what's going on and how to manage it. So D stands for define, which is understanding the condition. E is for educate, to teach the child about the impact. S is for speculate, looking ahead for positives and negatives. T is for teach, teaching strategies that maximize success. R for reduce the threat. E for exercise, which is physical activity to reduce stress. S for success, to replace doubt with confidence. And S for strategize, use what you learn to plan ahead. Now, something really important about stress is kids with ADHD tend to have chronic stress, and chronic stress has very negative impacts on brains, especially brains with executive function deficits. So it's a vicious cycle. And so the better you can deal with stress, the better the problems that arise with ADHD and executive function deficits will be. Day 5, we talked about medications and medical professionals. And we're going to be highlighting Dr. William Bill Dotson, who is a legendary psychiatrist. And his talk was entitled ADHD and Medications, How to Decide Whether to Medicate and How to Do It Best. Medication isn't natural. Medication is more natural than allowing your child to suffer unnecessarily, right? One of the big myths that parents or caregivers in general have is this excuse that medication isn't this natural thing and therefore, it shouldn't be used. But actually, what Dotson is saying here is it's a lot more natural for you to help your child with medication than it is to just let them suffer needlessly, right? And there are tons of studies and science that backs up these medicines have been around for many, many years. They do not have severe side effects, although they're very safe comparatively to other medicines. They can be easily mitigated if they're monitored with a pediatrician or whoever is prescribing the medication to you and explaining how to do that. And a combination of ADHD medications plus behavioral therapy is the most effective treatment for ADHD. So you can't have just one, right? If you just do behavioral therapies, you're not going to get the best results. If you just do medications, you're not going to get the best results. So doing both is super important. And in order to do both, you need to understand how to actually use ADHD medications. So he also talked about how medications work in the brain and explaining that to your child as trying out a new strategy, right? Which is much better approach than, hey, something's wrong with you and we want to give you these medications to change that. That's not at all the way that you should be having these conversations with your child. And so, just shifting the perspective to medications as a tool that you can use and just leverage it for what it's good for and discard the rest is a much better approach and will have significantly better results. I think it's something like 80% of cases of ADHD can be completely treated successfully with just medication. He also talked about how to look for a clinician who loves kids, especially those with ADHD, right? This is really important because if you just have your average pediatrician, about 50% of pediatricians do not know how to treat ADHD specifically. And so if they're not particularly interested in treating kids with ADHD, it's probably not a good fit because they're just going to discount all the issues that kids with ADHD have, either because they don't think it's as real as it is, or because they're not as educated on how to treat it, etc. So finding someone who really is bought into that and focused on helping with that is super important. And then there are two main types of medication used for ADHD. There are stimulants, which are for performance enhancement, and then alpha agonists, which lower the hyperarousal and rejection sensitivity of ADHD. So hyperarousal is, or can be described as the ways that kids get easily stimulated by certain things. And then rejection sensitivity is just being what could be considered overly sensitive to rejection instances. All right. So, you just learned some invaluable lessons on a webinar. Actually, before we get to that, I would like to see if we can bring on someone special for you. So give me 1 second here. I have a surprise for everyone. Anna, can you hear me?
I can. How are you, Adrian?
Hey, okay, so Dr. Anna Vagan will be joining us live for a Q&A, for the Q&A portion of this webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And I would like my team to send us the questions that have been asked in the chat, and we will tackle them one at a time. So while that happens, Anna, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody?
Absolutely. So I'm Dr. Anna Vagan, and I have a private practice in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. So for anyone in California, many of us have blue sky today for the first time in 3 weeks. It's wonderful to look out the window and know that your car's not going to be covered with ash. And, hoping that everyone who is suffering with the fire is doing okay, and we wish them all, I'm sure we all wish them all the best. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I have a little niche in the market. I work only with students and young adults who have social learning challenges. And so that covers a real range of diagnoses, students with ADHD, students with emotional challenges, students with anxiety or depression, anger problems, certainly students on the autism spectrum. And I work a lot with, when people say, in general, what do you do? I see kids individually and in groups. And I feel that I'm often working on helping students feel okay being uncomfortable. Because we really spend quite a bit of our days, unfortunately, it's part of being the human condition, is that we will often feel uncomfortable. And the challenges that many of my students have is that they really don't like that feeling. And so they really back away from it. They may express emotions in a really big way. Because as Ross Greene would say, lagging skills and unsolved problems. And so one of the ways that I work with students on that is to use a lot of media. And a lot of my work, my books are about using animated videos to help students understand relationships and feelings. And those complicated cognitive concepts like cooperation and compromise and how to deal with annoyment. When we go through the day, I don't know about you, Adrian, but I'm often annoyed. Yeah. Little things happen and it's like, why that person cut me off? Why did I spill my coffee? Whatever it is. And so having students talk about characters experiencing these feelings or these situations or challenges really then kind of creates an organic bridge to talking about themselves.
Yeah.
So I use animated videos, but I also use games. And that was, Adrian, when you and I spoke, we decided that I would talk about using games because they're a wonderful entree into building resilience and building ability to manage uncomfortable feelings. Because even though, I think I said this in my presentation, although when you first think about games, it's like, woohoo, they're always fun. But, if we're playing Monopoly and you get that Park Place and Boardwalk, I am not very happy. And so, on my handy feeling tracker, I might feel sad or mad or worried or any combination of those feelings. So whether they're tabletop games or video games or flicking games or card games, there is just this wealth of fabulous games. It's a great time in the gaming industry, in the creativity of games right now. So there's so many great choices.
Awesome. All right, so we've got a couple of questions, and Anna, feel free to answer these however you'd like. So let me just pull up. First question is from Deborah Courtwright, who asks, how can I help my son improve his ability to focus on information during lectures?
I'm sorry, to focus on, I missed those last two words.
How can I help my son improve his ability to focus on information during lectures?
All right. Well, that's a very broad question.
Yeah.
And part of the challenge of, doing a Q&A is kind of having to ad lib on the spur of the moment, because this is kind of a far field from talking about games. but I think there are a lot of questions to ask. And Deborah, I don't know if you're talking about a college student or a high school student, probably somewhere older than middle school. Middle schoolers don't often listen to lectures and have to take notes, but some do. I guess some of the questions I would want answers to would be, what is the format of the lecture? Is it on Zoom? Is it in person? Probably not right now. Does the instructor provide any notes that you could then highlight or print or do something with? Or is the student expected to take their own notes with a blank piece of paper? And there are lots of techniques for taking notes. There's one, I'm blocking on the name of it, where you divide the paper into 4 quadrants, and each quadrant has a certain part that you put in there. I would also wonder, is this student having challenges across the board? Is it every class that it's difficult to pay attention and take notes in? Or is there one troublesome class in particular? Is there one instructor who talks a lot faster than others? Is there an instructor who doesn't use visual supports, which again will be very helpful in keeping on track? So I think there's a lot of kind of sorting of information first. And if we can go under the assumption that it's a high school or a college or an older middle school student, again, making sure that they think it's a problem also, because as we know, the older students get, we really need to have their buy-in for whatever solutions we want to experiment with. So does the student think that they're struggling with lectures? Or are they not quite there yet? They think, I'm doing just fine. But then the first set of midterms comes and it's a wake-up call. So I think there's some questions and conversation to have with the student. I think going back to Ross Green's approach of that, let's figure this out together. And a lot of that is about having conversation, usually not in a moment of conflict. So not in a moment of homework doing where, oh my gosh, I don't know the assignment because I didn't take good notes. Probably not the best time to say, I don't think you're a very good note taker. Finding, maybe a weekend time and saying, I want to talk to you about something. I have some thoughts about school. When might be a good time for us to do that? So that's just my first try on that one.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. You touched on a lot of different things. On that same vein, we have another question that I think is relevant. Just had it in front of me. Here. So Elizabeth Stone asks, how to help students that don't want help, which I'm sure is a very common problem.
That's a very, very challenging one, and especially in middle school. Middle schoolers are not always known to be of the age where, a parent says, I'm not so sure about this, and they're like, yeah, right, and they just leave. So it's really tricky. Oftentimes I do see students who are really struggling, but don't really recognize that they're struggling. And so, for example, I just saw before I came on this call, I saw a middle school student with ADHD. And one of the challenges is that he shows his feelings really big. So if he gets back a spelling test and he sees that he didn't do as well as he anticipated, he has this big reaction and he might rip up the paper and stomp out of the classroom and maybe say some words that aren't so great to say in school. And so he's having these big reactions. But to say, you're having really big reactions, we need to work on that. Sometimes we have to find the back door to those conversations with middle school. And so I actually have what we did today. We watched a YouTube and a feeling tracker. I talked about this in my presentation. So here's mad, sad, and worried, and happy is on this side. And so we watched a YouTube and we tracked what feelings the characters had at particular moments. And so the one that we did today, it's all relatively under here, because what this student also has is we talked about how at school, and this is feelings on a 1 to 5, you kind of need to stay about a 2.5 or lower. If you get up to the 4s or 5s, it's really it's too big a feeling for school. So we talked about how not only and this was a great YouTube called Scrambled. It's a wonderful student who misses the bus on the subway and then has a little Rubik's Cube comes over and wants to get fixed. And so in Scrambled, this character pretty much kept her feelings under control. She got a little bit angry a couple of times. When I saw this student yesterday, we watched a different video where feelings were all up here.
Mm.
And so what I'm working on with this student, and it's a pathway to address the issue of this is what you need to work on. And so we're using characters to talk about the characters first. Wow, characters have really big reactions. What do you think about that? Do you think that big reaction really fits? And again, building that understanding of, do we feel the student has a challenge with cooperation? Do we feel they have a challenge with being annoying? And so my framework is, let's just talk about the concept of cooperation. Let's just talk about flexibility before we put the spotlight on you, saying, you got a problem with this. Because none of us likes to have our problems pointed out. But once we build that comprehension, because again, these are super abstract ideas for kids with ADHD. Once they understand the concept more and talk about how characters struggle, and I might give some examples about how I might struggle, then usually, especially in groups, we'll have a peer group say, you know what, that kind of happened to me. And once you have that peer saying, it kind of happened to me, and I understand that this is a therapeutic example I'm giving, but giving examples about how we all struggle so that students feel okay then saying, you know, it's actually kind of hard for me. It's hard for me when people tell me I talk too much all the time. You know, and we want that child to feel it's safe to open up and admit to challenges. You know, in middle school, it's really the time when a lot of students are coming to grips with their disability, with their diagnosis. Yeah. Oh, I have ADHD. Now I have to figure out how that impacts me and what my responsibility is in managing my ADHD and not using it as an excuse. Well, I have ADHD. I don't know how to take notes. I have ADHD, never going to learn. And I think that's what makes middle school such a challenging time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we have a couple more big burning pains or problems that people are experiencing. They're really very diverse. So I'm just going to lay them out and you can tackle whichever one because I don't think you'll be able to tackle every single one. But we've got a comment that says medication, fidget spinners, getting enough sleep, having a decent blood sugar level, finding anything to catch their interest so the hyper-focus can kick in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as a mom, I can certainly say that hydration and food are really, really important. And helping middle school students who are becoming kind of in charge of what they eat because they're often outside of the home and they're going out, hopefully soon, to be able to get stuff and to say, every body is different. What makes your body work well for you? I know that I'm really not a carb person. I'm kind of a fruit, veggie, protein person. And knowing that helps me a lot. And so helping students start thinking about what helps their body. How much sleep do you need? And I've had many challenges with students over sleep in middle school and beyond. The middle school student is not programmed to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Unfortunately, that's, school starts around 8:15, 8:30. And so in some ways, the system is really against the middle school and high school brains and bodies of students. But also talking about, if you're talking about what's good for your body, sleep and exercise certainly add into that also. Because especially in shelter in place and COVID, we are spending a lot more time sitting than we're used to. And so that's really super important, is to help kids understand their bodies. Fidget spinners, the whole idea about fidgets is that they're supposed to be a helping product, not a distraction. And that's often very difficult to figure out. Because if I'm using this pen, as a fidget, but then I start doing this, and I'm going to do it on the next person's head. It's not a fidget anymore. It's a distraction and a problem. And so I think, and often middle school students don't want a fidget that will make them look different. Because no middle schooler wants to look different from the crowd. This is about blending in. And so a lot of fidgets that may have been useful in elementary school are hard to continue because students, they don't want to have, they don't want to have something to chew unless it's gum and cool. And so again, working with the school, working with the student, and determining, do they still really need the fidgets? And how can the fidgets perhaps become less intrusive and less of a distraction? So that's what I find with fidgets. It's not, they just drive everybody crazy because the student next to you wants to see your fidget spinner. And that's not helpful. So making sure that the fidget is needed sensorily. Can gum substitute? Can you get the school to say gum? I've had IEPs write in gum because some schools are often opposed to gum, and it's like, well, if that's what the student needs as an accommodation, you're going to write it into the IEP so that the teachers don't protest. As far as finding something that catches a student's attention, I'm almost wondering if there's a qualifier in that of finding what is interesting to the student that the parent approves of or likes, or thinks there could be a better interest. It's not a social enough interest. It's too techy. It's too video game that we don't like focused. Because I do think that students have interests and find interests, but they need exposure to be able to look at that. And part of what middle school is about is experimenting with the world to determine when you get to college or after high school, what do you want to do? What is your interest that will give meaning to your life? And often people pick a career that accommodates their ADHD or their differences to a certain degree that is helpful. And so I think it's really exposure and being able to listen kind of with an open mind and an open heart to interests or curiosities. Is there anything that you've ever wanted to kind of check out? Let's try and find a way to make that happen. I think you've already talked about medication, and I'm a PhD, and so I'm not a subscriber, and so I'd like to just give that question to all of the MDs who spoke.
Definitely, of course. Another really great question I found was, how can you help a smart, anxious, and impulsive student with ADHD and low self-esteem manage the emotional issues that he has to deal with in middle school, i.e. peer pressure, bullying, organizational and executive functioning skills, multiple teachers and teaching styles, changing classes, assignments and due dates, and so on? That was asked by Anne. Now I know there's a lot to cover there, but I think what we can really focus on is, because so many kids with ADHD are smart, but they have anxiety a lot of the time, they're impulsive, or they have low self-esteem, manage the emotional issues that come with peer pressure, I think is a great question.
I think that, and I only have 3 minutes left.
Yeah,
I got 3 minutes for this one. I think one step is what was happening in 3rd, 4th, 5th grades, wherever the break is to enter into middle school. What was being done by the school district and the family? Was it being addressed in any way? Was that being helpful? Was it not being helpful? And partnering with the school for the transition into middle school. So that's the real first question, is what's been going on and was it helpful or not? I think a lot of what the question asker alludes to is about resilience, because resilience allows us to manage uncomfortable feelings. It allows us to focus when we need to problem solve and organize. It allows us to be more flexible. So resilience is a super, super important ability. And what we do know, the American Psychological Association has a wonderful page on their website for information about resilience, because we know that resilience is not, here you go, Anna, this is what you get for life and you can't have any more. we know that resilience can be built and increased. How can that happen? By working on understanding emotions, by having better self-esteem, thinking about better ways, having a better sense of yourself by having had successes. Successes often depend on being persistent and problem solving and managing our emotions. And so that kind of circles right back to the game idea that games are a fabulous way to build resilience, and hopefully in a way that is fun. I know that in my presentation, I listed a lot of my top picks for games, whether they're card games or tabletop games or whatever. And there's usually at least one game that is a good fit for a student, at least one. And so I would suggest experimenting with playing games at home. If your student's not interested, start playing the game with your spouse, another sibling, the cat, I don't really care who, and see if that student will kind of look around the corner and like, oh, wow, what are you doing? That kind of looks interesting.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Anna. I know you have to go. You're a busy woman. That was great, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for answering these questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adrian. It was a great program. Thanks for having me be part of it.
Of course. All the best. Have a good one.
Everybody.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. So we will pick up where we left off here. All right. So can everyone see my screen now? Yes. Okay. So you just learned some really invaluable lessons on a webinar, right? But how would you like to learn directly from over 40 of these world-class ADHD experts, just like Anna, and 6 specialized instructors? This is the special offer that I was talking about at the end of the webinar. So before I dive in to the online course, I want to explain a couple of different things. There are 3 main levels of support that we're talking about here, right? You can stay free forever and just, join our blog and watch our YouTube videos and all of that. And that will help you. There's no doubt. But in terms of revolutionary change, that will not do that. A step above that would be ADHD membership, which I talked about at the beginning. And that's just access to this ADHD expert moderated support group, plus all the perks and deals that we get with sponsors and affiliates and speakers like Anna Vagan, right? A level above that would be the Summit All Access Pass, where you get these 40 plus expert master classes, session notes, handouts, MP3 downloads, access to the ADHD expert moderated support group for a month, perks and deals, and then a level above that would be the online course. And that's what we're talking about here today. So everything in the All Access Pass, plus these 6 in-depth walkthrough lessons that cover the biggest burning pains that we know every single parent goes through, right? So it is by far, the ADHD Middle School online course is by far the #1 most comprehensive walkthrough course to teach you how to help your kids thrive through the middle school years. It looks like Anna has come back backstage. Anna, did you want to come by? Okay, let's have you back on.
You know, some days are like that.
Okay, no worries. I'm happy to keep doing Q&A. I think we had a lot more.
I had a group starting at 4, and of course I have a group starting at 4:30, so I kind of threw you under the bus there, Adrian, like checking out too early. My apologies. I'm glad to be back.
No worries, no worries. Okay, cool. So we can jump back into some Q&A. I know there's a lot more issues that we've heard from people listening and also some questions. Okay, so let's see. Oops, just skipped over. What is the best way to administer a test to a student with ADHD? And this is asked by Linda Morris.
I guess my question, well, diagnostic tests are typically administered by professionals who are licensed to administer them. And so typically for an ADHD student, that would either probably be a psychologist or a neuropsychologist, or myself, a speech language pathologist. And part of the training that we all receive in our respective areas of emphasis is about how do you administer tests. And so I guess my short answer to that question would be that, if you feel that your child needs an assessment, find them somebody who is experienced with the age that you're talking about and the particular challenges that you feel your student might have. Right now, many psychologists are doing testing online via Zoom. For example, there's a HIPAA-compliant way to be on Zoom. I have a HIPAA-compliant account on Zoom. And many, many measures can be given online through shared screens and shared materials. So even during COVID, we're still able to do assessments. There are some measures that we can't give, but there are many, many diagnostic tools that are still available to us. So I guess my answer is to find a professional that knows how to do that.
Yeah, that's a totally fair answer. And actually for this next one, I think it's a tough question as well, an interesting one, and I'm sure one that is very common. I am not able to be my son's tutor or teacher. I am not good at it, and honestly, I don't want to do it. How will my son be able to do any work at home, especially with remote, which seems to double up the at-home work?
Yes, I certainly have heard that. And this is a very big challenge right now, and I'm not sure I have a lot of answers for it, because as parents are not meant to be teachers in most circumstances. Certainly, as parents, we teach our children many things. And some parents are great homeschoolers, and it's a goodness of fit. And what I'm hearing right now is a lot of students who have various challenges there's not always that goodness of fit between the student and the parent. And the parents are working, parents are still working, often from home. And the pressures on families right now, I think, are enormous. And I think some schools are managing it better than others. So I think one of the things that I've noticed that really, to me, is pointing out the disparity in this country is that there's a percentage of parents who have the resources to hire this out. They can hire a tutor. There are a number of teachers who left their teaching position and are now, on Craigslist and looking for positions with small groups of children and families. And it's a big concern of mine. And I think of anyone who works within a social justice framework, that this online teaching is widening the gap incredibly. There was a study done kind of now relatively in the beginning of COVID in summer that showed that middle class and upper middle class kids, when virtual learning came on, they took a dip. They were kind of messing around and not, doing everything. And then in general, they've kind of taken off. But students from lower socioeconomic families dipped down and continued to dip down. So this is a much bigger issue than, Adrian, you and I are going to be able to problem solve, this afternoon. It is a very big challenge. And I just don't have an answer for that other than patience and keep breathing. It's hard.
Yeah,
it's very hard.
I mean, this is, if I can take a stab at it from my end, the best answer I would give is hopefully, through what we're trying to do at Smart Course, we will be able to solve that problem. Because really it just comes down to having access to the right people at the right time to be able to solve the right problems. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, right? Like, you want to be able to get the network of support that can help in all kinds of different situations that are going to be popping up during this time. And know, like, hey, when this comes up, I'm not alone. I'm going to be able to ask someone who knows what they're talking about and I can trust to actually solve the problem for me. And further, with our vision, we're trying to build a collaborative platform between all of the different caregivers and the school and the medical professionals and the kid, so that it's not just up to the parents to be the sole advocates anymore.
Yes.
It's because that's an unrealistic solution. It's definitely what needs to be done right now, but it's not sustainable. And it's unrealistic to expect a parent who, in many cases could be a single parent, could be working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, to like appropriately educate themselves on like 7 different specialized skills that take people normally a career to do. Like, that's impossible. So yeah, I totally agree. It's a really profound problem. I mean, it's why we started here, because it's broken. The system is broken.
Well, and I think, just to follow up on what you're saying, Adrian, to give parents, a cheat sheet. Often what we want when we are overwhelmed is, I want you to tell me 3 things to do. Just give me 3 things to try. Don't give me a list this long. Tell me 3 things, and I can probably do 3 things. Another idea is, could parents come together in a school or in a class and say, look, all of the 7th grade students who are in resource in their IEP, will the resource person have a Zoom call with us parents and tell us 3 things we can try, 3 things we can do. I saw a student yesterday with ADHD, and I said, so I want you to give me a tour of your work area, your desk. So she's very happy to do that. And one of the things I noticed, because they're moving, and right in front of her, where she's sitting, right in front, is a countdown to moving day. So it's like 22 days, 21 days, 22 days, and some of them are crossed out, and there's a calendar. And I say, oh, wow, tell me about that. And she's like, my mom put that out there because we're moving, and she just yes, look at your eyes.
Yeah.
This little bundle of anxiety.
Yeah.
And I know that her mom put it up there as motivation.
But it wasn't causing motivation.
Well, it causes feelings to go above this line,
Right. Yeah.
Feelings are going up. And in that regard, we just need to move that list away from front and center, right above the computer. And so part of it, and so I emailed the mom. I said, could you just kind of move that maybe to her bedroom or her bathroom, or, not in Learning Central.
Yeah.
And I think those kind of easy tips of, parents just want to know, tell me what to do.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. Another question that we have from Ann Sire is, she's looking for strategies for buy-in from my 12-year-old who started high school this year.
Well, it's a broad question because I'm not sure what she needs buy-in about.
Yeah, I think we'll safely assume that it's buy-in to help themselves with coping with their ADHD.
Mm-hmm. I think one conversation that parents begin to have with their students in middle school and high school and beyond is about their disability and what their disability looks like and what it means for them as far as challenges. And I think that, again, finding the right moment to have these conversations is important, a moment where you as a parent are relaxed and calm. Because if you're frazzled and impatient, I can guarantee you the conversation will go nowhere. To have a conversation about, well, we've always, you take that medication. I want to make sure that you understand why you take that medication. What is that medication for? Many students don't know. Or they'll say, oh, it's for my ADHD. Well, how is it supposed to help you? Well, I don't know. Does it help you? I don't know. And so to start that education process that parents can do about, let's look it up together. Let's ask the psychiatrist next time we see him or her. Let's ask them, so what is this medication really supposed to do for you? And make that bridge between psychiatrist student. Because, sometimes it's a very fast appointment. And the parent can kind of intervene to say, can we just take 5 minutes for you to just explain what the medication is meant to do? To start that education process. Because the more we can get a student to start, again, to look at themselves and get that buy-in rather than the denial. Because, I'm getting older, my vision is not so good. I can deny that for a long time. And I'm going to walk around with bad vision, and I'm going to get headaches, and I'm going to, until I say, what, I think I should probably get glasses, even though I may not want to. That's probably a good idea. I should probably do that. I think I'm going to do that. So to move past the denial of the disability. Now that also means that the parent has to have moved past the denial of the disability. And sometimes that isn't the case. And sometimes there needs to be more education and demystifying a diagnosis and destigmatizing a diagnosis. That having ADHD doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It means that your brain is in some ways different. And in some ways, the ADHD is a beautiful brain and has incredible potential to do spectacular things in this world. And having that understanding and helping students understand, you've actually got a really cool brain. In some ways, your brain may not be your friend, but in some ways, my brain isn't my friend either. And moving through middle school and high school are really the years of coming to grips with learning strategies, being patient learning strategies. I have many students say, I often talk to students about hot versus cool thoughts. A hot thought will make your uncomfortable feeling get bigger, and a cool thought will bring that feeling down. And so I had this conversation last week. We were talking about it. He says, "Oh, I know how to do that. I've already learned how to do that." And it's like, because when I ask you what you're thinking about something, you've got this horrible hot thought, and that sense of we have to practice. You don't just read it in a book and boom, I can use cool thoughts when I'm under stress. It doesn't work that way. And often teenagers who are impatient, who wanted it yesterday, need support to understand this comes with practice. And for some people, the learning curve is like this, and for some it's like this, and for some it's, kind of like this. To recognize progress and to recognize flexibility when you see it. So if I say to a student, wow, you gave over that blue playing piece without any argument, and I know you really like the blue piece. As parents, it's easier for us to point out and notice what we don't like our children doing than for us to notice and point out what we like them doing. And to notice and to say, that was really cool. I saw you erase that problem and just try it again. Just little comments like that help our students feel better. One of the reasons that students, and often students with ADHD, are so into video games is that the video game understands them. And the video game will only ask us to do what it believes we can do. And so then when we meet that goal, the video game takes it up just a notch, enough that we can do it. And so the video game is and that's what a good video game is. That's how it's constructed and built to make us feel successful, but still eager to do better. Whereas there have been many studies done on students with ADHD. How many negative comments from teachers do they get in balance with positive? And you can probably guess they're getting a lot more negative than positive. And so as parents, the more we can point out what we notice, not in a, oh, I'm so proud of you, because that's making me feel good. That's not making, my child's role is not to make me feel proud. My child's job in life is to feel good about what they do themselves. But we can point it out and say, gee, I really noticed that. Last week you kind of ripped up that paper, but this week, you did 3 problems. Wow. I wonder what it was today that made it easier, because it isn't just about ADHD and attention. It's about mood and temperament and all right, have you had enough to eat? Have you, are you waiting for one thing that will break, the straw that broke the camel's back and you're going to explode? There's so much that enters into it. So I hope that's somewhat.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually want to expand on one of those points, because I'm pretty sure I read it through Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, or I don't know if he did the study or if someone else did the study on the amount of positive comments that you would need to offset the negative. I believe it's like 5 positives to 1 negative. Because of that impact, right? And when you brought that up, of the amount of negative feedback that these kids get on a daily basis, and that's just from the teacher, right? So we're not even talking about the parents themselves, their friends, they're not friends, right? And so just to think about the amount of positive feedback that they would have to be getting to offset that is enormous. It's enormous. And a lot of these people who are giving that negative feedback are not going to be giving positive feedback, right? Because they're either being insulting or whatever, they're attacking. So the parent then has to take on the responsibility, or the friends have to take on the responsibility of adding much more positive feedback to offset all of the negative that they feel elsewhere in their lives. So it's really it's a lot. It's a big amount. And so don't be stingy about it.
And as parents, it's hard to do that, because that takes time. And right now we're all going 27,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And we're
absolutely.
all stressed.
All right. So this is it's just how to best help or support, right?
Yes. Adrian, you froze. If you were reading a question, you were frozen for a couple seconds.
Oh, sorry. So the question, it's a very broad question, but I think we can specify it or just take it on generally. The question is how to best help / support, right? So this is asked by Lygia, and I'm assuming it's just, she's wondering how she could be the most helpful and supportive for her child with ADHD or middle schooler with ADHD.
We, as parents, and I'm a parent of 2 grown children, our children can be so different from each other in a family. And our children can be so different from us. It's sometimes hard. My son showed me this PowerPoint that he did for work, and I'm like, I can't believe you came out of my body and you produced that, because that's so beyond what I could do. And so I guess one reminder I have for parents, because I do have older children, is that all of the learning that goes on from middle school up to young adulthood, which is 26 right now, there is so much change that happens between 18 and 26. And I've been in this business for over 30 years. And so I often see kids for 10, 15 years. And I see these changes. And so part of it is that belief in that students will continue to change and grow after high school. Do we want them leaving high school in the best possible shape? Absolutely. Do we want to recognize that every day and every moment of school is meaningful? Or for me, that every hour of therapy that I do cannot be wasted because there is limited time. But we have to balance that with that recognition of our kids are going to keep growing, and they each have gifts in addition to challenges. And while I know it's difficult to remember that when you're in the trenches, and COVID has absolutely destroyed all family harmony, and everybody is so stressed, to remember that every child has their gifts, and we will get through any particular day or any particular hour or any particular batch of homework or report writing. That, feelings, emotions are ebbing and flowing, and hard times and good times are ebbing and flowing. And so to take that moment when everything looks like it's just in the toilet and think, you know what, it's not always going to feel like this. It's not always going to feel like it's in the toilet.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a good place to wrap up the Q&A. Thank you so much, Anna, for coming on again.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we will have you on again soon.
Love to. All right. Thanks, Adrian. Bye-bye.
All right, Anna. All the best. Bye-bye. All right. So we will just pick up where we left off and wrap up the special bonus offer that we have prepared for you today. So here is my screen once again. And I was just in the middle of presenting the ADHD in Middle School online course and why it is the #1 comprehensive walkthrough course to teach you how to help your kids thrive through the middle school years. So here's what you get when you upgrade to the ADHD in Middle School online course during this special limited time period. You're going to get the 6 in-depth walkthrough lessons with Melissa Orlov, Dr. Conchetta DeCaria, Mr. Daniel Komarski, Dr. Sarah Wheeler, Dr. Sarah Allen, and Dr. Sharon Celine. Melissa will be tackling all of the problems that arise at home with parent-child relationships, spousal relationships or marriage relationships, child-sibling relationships, and all the ways to tackle those better. Dr. Conchetta DeCaria talks about how to get a ADHD diagnosis and why it's really important to get one, and how you can use it to understand the different comorbidities that may exist with your child. Mr. Daniel Komarski covers a broad range of topics from parenting, as he was also a parent, to the school side of things, to the tougher side or the fears that generally parents will be experiencing and how to tackle them and why they're not necessarily well-founded, actually. Dr. Sarah Wheeler, as a school psychologist and ADHD consultant, talks all about how to get an IEP or 504 plan in place, what the difference is, why they're important, why they could be helpful, what the role of a school psychologist is at school and why they should be helping and how they should be helping, because I've also heard some horror stories on that side as well. Dr. Sarah Allen talking all about ADHD brain and how it's structured and how the neurochemistry works and how you can use your unique child's ADHD profile to inform which school accommodations you should be getting in place for your child. And Dr. Sharon Celine talking about executive function deficits and how to build executive skills, as well as anxiety, which is ever present with kids with ADHD, and how to better deal with anxiety. And lastly, her 5 C's of parenting, which is a better approach to parenting overall. Next, you have the 40+ video masterclass sessions, right, from the ADHD Middle School Summit. So that's from, world-class leading experts like Dr. Russell Ramsey, Dr. William Dodson, Dr. Peg Dawson, Dr. Edward Hollowell, Dr. Ross Green, Dr. Jerome Schultz, Dr. George McCloskey, Dr. Roberto Olivardia, Dr. Manju Banerjee, Elaine Taylor-Klaus, Diane Dempster, Cindy Goldrich, Alan Graham. All of these experts and many more have dove deep on one pain point or one problem that is experienced with kids with ADHD during the middle school years and solved it. And on top of that, with the All Access Pass, which you would be getting with the online course, you would also get the action guides and worksheets that come with these masterclass sessions so that it's very, very easy for you to take action on instead of just watching their masterclasses and not having it actually impact your life. Next, we have audio downloads for everything, right? All the content you can download via audio if you prefer to listen in the car or on the go while you're jogging, working out, whatever it is, so that you can go through a lot of this content a lot more efficiently. These session notes, the handouts, and the action guides from all of those masterclass sessions. Plus, you are going to get members-only VIP Q&As like this one with other experts and myself, as well as ADHD expert lifetime access to the ADHD in Middle School online course community, which is specific to instructors as well as peers of the online course, as well as a month of access to Smart Courses ADHD membership, which includes our expert community and exclusive perks and deals. Also, you will be getting access to exclusive bonus resources, perks, deals like on discounted premium courses, training, other VIP Q&As, our coaching program, and much, much more. And when you upgrade today, you will get many of the perks and deals that are listed here. So Cindy Goldrich has offered her Common Connected workshop. You're going to get a parenting workshop with Andrea Elrome at a discounted price, live Q&As with Mr. Daniel Kromarski that we've done, access to our coaching program with direct access to instructors, a marriage workshop with Melissa Orlov, the live Q&A that we did with Dr. Anna Vagan, plus 40% off your first Smart course, and exclusive deals from our partners and sponsors on other tools and resources. So in total, we're talking about over $9,691 of value, which means that you're saving over 95% of the full value price when you purchase today. So again, to recap, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get lifetime access to those 40 plus ADHD expert masterclass videos and the 6 in-depth walkthrough lessons from the online course. That's totaling 70 plus hours of masterclasses and walkthroughs in audio MP3 format, plus the 40 plus session notes, handouts, and action guides from the summit, plus exclusive lifetime access to the AIMS online course community with your peers and instructors, and 1 month, I know it says 6 there, that's a mistake, 1 month access to Smart Courses ADHD expert community, plus additional exclusive bonus resources like discounted premium courses, training, VIP Q&As, coaching programs, and much, much more, and all these special deals and discounts from our partners and more. So here's the best part. We're so confident that you'll value everything in the ADHD in Middle School online course gives you that we're willing to offer you an outrageous 14-day, 100% money-back guarantee. That means that you can go through the entire course, and if it's not what you thought it was, you can get your money back. There's one caveat, which is as long as you didn't take advantage of those special one-time deals, then you get your money back. And you can email support@smartcourse.io if you have any questions about that. So, with all that said, I'm going to leave this on for the next 15 minutes. It is now 7:32 p.m. ET, so we'll just call it an even. We'll call it even at 7:50 p.m. ET, Eastern Time. This offer will no longer be available, and I'm just going to put up the link on the screen right now so you can all see it. So, if you access that link right now, over the next just over 15 minutes, this will be available to you all. So if you're just listening in, I will spell out the link for you in just a second. Okay, so if you're just listening in, the link to access is bit, that's B as in bat, I, T as in T, dot, L, Y, slash, AIMS, dash, course, dash, FAB, for fast action bonus. So again, that's bit.ly, bit.ly/, AIMS, AIMS, dash, course, dash, fab, or FAB. All right. So I'm just going to let that run for the next now 16 minutes, and then I will conclude this webinar. Just to clarify for everybody, I should have mentioned, if you're watching this on our website, the links to the online course Fast Action Bonus and the ADHD membership and the ADHD in middle school Summit All Access Pass are all just beneath the stream. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please just access the link directly, or you can go to the live session page, which I will spell out for you. So if you go to www.smartcourse.io/ADHD-middle-school-live-session, and you go to that link, you'll be able to see all of those links as well. Sorry about that. It looks like the stream disconnected for just a second there. Let me make sure to put that screen back up. Oh, whoops. Okay. All right. So for the last 5 minutes or so, I am just going to welcome everyone who has joined. Thank you so much, everybody. If you are just joining in now, you still have another 5 minutes to take advantage of the online course Fast Action Bonus, which will be expiring at 7:50 p.m. Right after this webinar is done. So if you are interested in the course, you will never get a better deal than this. Okay, so first of all, Hala, thank you so much for joining. Alicia, thank you so much. Jody, Iran, Aaron, Jonathan, Karen, Verna, Heather, Sylvia, Denise, Lauren, Patricia, Priscilla, Miriam, Skamagas, Tina, Evelyn, Courtney, Juliana, Naomi, Marcia, Kristen, Susan, Victoria, Elizabeth, Beth, Michele, Jenny, Arlene, Leslie, Easter, Sonia, Nicole, Jennifer, Patricia, Marcella, Stacy, Margaret, Carrie, Lynn, Mine, Christina, Sarah, Leslie. There's a lot. Thank you, everybody, for joining. If I didn't mention your name about that, um, please reach out to us at support@smartcourse.io if you have any questions about getting access or any questions about anything else. I want to just thank all of you who have stayed till the end to listen to this. It has been a long webinar, hopefully a very valuable one for all of you, but we would still love to hear all of your feedback. So if you could smartcourse.io or fill out our surveys as we send them out, that would be incredibly helpful and allow us to help better serve you. So please, your feedback is really, really valuable, and I really appreciate it. All right, we're just going to wrap up in about 2 minutes here. So I'll let anyone who has any questions or just is going through the process to finish up. Deb Quell, thank you so much for the kind words. I really appreciate it. Lygia, thank you so much as well. Very nice. Gary, thanks for reaching out. All right, everybody. We have hit 7:50, so I'm going to go ahead and end this stream. I hope all of you have a really great night. Thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to seeing you all either in one of our Smart Course YouTube videos or the Smart Course group, or an ADHD membership, or the All Access Pass, or the online course, or hopefully even our next summit. So thank you so much for listening. Please send your feedback and have a good night.